Good morning, boys and girls, and welcome to Storytime. I'm here today with Teddy because we're going to tell you a bedtime story. The story that I'm going to tell you is one that I heard first as a child growing up in the United States in the 1960s. The name of the story is Tailypo. The version of the story I'm going to tell you is the one I heard as a child. However, if you visit the library, you can also read a version of the story called Tailypo, written by Paul Galdone and Joanna Galdone. I'm going to put Teddy down right now because you're going to help me tell the story in a few minutes, and I'm going to need both of my hands to help you. Now, this story I first heard visiting my cousins. My cousins lived in a part of the United States called Appalachia in the state of West Virginia. This story has been told by the people of West Virginia for hundreds and hundreds of years. One autumn, we went to visit my cousins. After dinner, we were all sitting on the porch. It was a cool autumn evening. And one of the favorite things we love to do as it gets dark as a family is tell each other funny stories and scary stories. This was a scary story, but not too scary, told to me by one of my grandfather's friends. Now, in this story, there's a place for you to help me. And in the story, there's a sound, a terrible sound. It's the sound of something like claws tearing up a piece of wood. When I think of this sound, what I think about is the most horrible sound in the world to me. Do you know what that is, boys and girls? Well, it's the sound of someone running their fingernails down a chalkboard. And to me, that sound is scritch, scritch, scritch. Boys and girls, can you help me make that sound? Scritch, scritch, scritch. Now let's begin the story. Once upon a time, there was an old man who lived in the woods. He lived in a log cabin in that woods, and it was his home. He had one room, so that was his living room, his kitchen, his bedroom, but it wasn't his bathroom. He went to the outhouse in the backyard for that. Now, the old man didn't like people very much, so he liked living in the woods by himself. And the only company he had were three of his dogs, and he used them for hunting because the old man liked the woods because it had everything he needed to live. Every morning, he would call his three dogs, "Get on up here, boys, we're going hunting." And he would take a basket and his gun, and he would go into the woods. He would spend the day looking for animals for his dinner, collecting berries, and collecting roots and vegetables to eat. One day, the old man went out into the wood with his dogs, but because it was fall, a sudden storm came up. There was lots of rain, lots of wind, and soon he had to go home. He was very sad because all he managed to catch was one teeny weeny little rabbit. And as you know, rabbits are good eating, but there's not much meat on them there bones. So the old man took the rabbit, made himself some stew because he was all cold and he needed to warm up after that rainstorm, and he ate the stew right up and he gave the bones to his dogs to eat. However, there wasn't much food that night, so he went to bed a little hungry. And as you know, whenever you're hungry, it's hard to sleep. So the old man went into the bed and he pulled up the covers around himself and he got all snug, but he started to toss and turn, because all he could think about was his next meal. Now, in the middle of the night, the old man heard a strange sound. He heard a scratch, scratch, thump, thump. He looked around and he could hear the rain outside, and he thought to himself, "While that storm is still going on, I guess there's some twigs brushing against my window in my house." He heard the sound again, scratch, scratch, thump, thump, and he looked, and he didn't see anything in his window. The noise continued and got a bit louder, and he started to hear screech, as though something was trying to claw up the side of his house. And he thought to himself, "Darn critters, I'm in my house all safe and warm with my dogs, and you can't come in here with me. This is my house. Go away." Well, the noise continued, and he heard scritch, scritch, scritch. And he had had enough. He got out of the bed, he threw open the door of his shack, and he said to the boys, "Hey, boys, get on out here. You chase that critter away from my house." And soon enough, all three dogs came racing out of his house with a loud grrr, grrr, howl, howl, ruff, 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 grrr, grrr, howl, ruff, 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 ruff. And soon he could hear them chasing that animal into the woods. He stood in the doorway and he waited for the dogs to come back. When the dogs came back, he said to them, as he patted them on the head, "Good boys, you earned your dinner tonight. You showed that critter who's the boss." And he shut his cabin door, locked it, and went back into bed and had a good night's sleep. The very next morning, the sun came out. The old man took his gun, took his baskets, and called to his dogs, "Come on, boys, it's hunting time," and went out into the woods. He had a very good day that day. He found lots of yummy food. That evening he went home and he made a wonderful dinner which he shared with his dogs. And soon all of them climbed into bed with a big round tummy and started to fall off into sleep. However, they did not sleep well that night. In the middle of the night, the old man heard scritch, 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 and the scritching sounded as if something was climbing up the walls of the cabin. Then he heard a loud thump, as if something had jumped onto the roof. The old man listened and listened, and he thought to himself, "That critter hasn't learned its lesson. What's up with him?" Well, he watched and he listened, and soon enough the scritching got louder, and right above where he was laying in bed, a tiny hole started to appear, as if something was trying to get inside. And as he watched, down came something black and gray and squiggly, and he did not know what it is, but that man had had enough. He jumped out of bed, he went to his side of his cabin, and he got himself an axe that he used to chop the firewood every morning. And you know what he did? He cut that critter's tail right off. There was a loud screeching and howling like you had never heard before. Ah! 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 And whatever it was thumped and jumped and ran away. Now the old man looked at what he had cut off, and he held it up, and it was long and thick and covered with black-gray fur. That old man had lived in the woods for over 50 years, and in his time as a hunter, he had never seen anything like that. However, as a hunter, he knew meat's meat, a man's got to eat. So he looked at that tail again, and he thought to himself, "Aha, I think I'll have that for breakfast." Now, boys and girls, I'm sure you're terrified. What is this? What is he doing? What is he thinking? Well, one of the things, if you hunt, people always ask you, "How can you eat this?" or "What does it taste like?" Well, that morning, the old man found out. He took it, he cut it up into little pieces, and he fried it up with his bacon and eggs, and he made himself a breakfast. And if you asked him what he tasted like, he would say, "You know what? Wasn't too bad. Kind of tasted like chicken." And that afternoon, he went out hunting again. This day, he also was lucky. He got a lot of food. He came home, and him and the dogs sat down and had their dinner. As they were having the dinner, the old man said to his dogs, "I taught that critter a lesson. Between me and you, he will never come here again." So he went to bed. That night he went into bed, he pulled up his covers and snuggled down for a nice deep sleep. But suddenly he heard scritch, scritch, scritch. It started to get a little louder. Boys and girls, can you help me make a really loud scritch? Scritch, scritch, scritch. And he heard a voice say, Tailypo, Tailypo, all I wants is me Tailypo. And the old man listened, and he said, enough of that, you didn't learn your lesson. So he jumped out of the bed, he called to his dogs, hey boys, get on up here, threw open the cabin door, and told his dogs, go get that critter. And soon enough, the dogs raced out with a howoo, howoo, grrr, ruff, 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 and they chased that critter. The old man stood in the doorway and he listened, and their cries got fainter and fainter and fainter as the dogs chased the animal deeper and deeper into the forest. The old man stood there waiting for the dogs to come back. But you know what? They didn't. He scratched his head and he thought to himself, well, you know what? Maybe they will need to come back in the morning because they've chased the critter deep down into the woods. So he shut the door, pulled up his covers, and went back to bed. The very next morning, the old man got up. He started to cook breakfast. He opened the front door of his house, and he looked for his dogs. And he said, hey, boys, where are you? Come on, breakfast is ready. And you know what? They weren't there. He scratched his head, and he said, those bad doggies, they're off in the woods playing. I'm sure they'll come home dinner time. So he took his gun, and he took his basket, and he went off into the woods by himself to hunt that day. That day, he was very lucky, and he caught lots of yummy things to eat for his dinner. He made a big dinner, and he left the front door open, thinking if his dogs smelt the yummy food, sure enough, they'd come. But guess what, boys and girls? They didn't come. The old man started to get a little worried. So he shut the door, and he sat in his chair, and as he ate his dinner, he thought, I have nothing to worry about. I have my house. I have my gun. I fixed the hole in the roof. There ain't nothing getting in here now, and went to sleep. And soon enough, round about midnight, when the moon was high in the sky and the wind had started to blow, as it always does in autumn, the old man once again heard, scritch, scritch, scritch. And he said to himself, I'm safe here, nothing to worry about. And he heard a voice say, Tailypo, Tailypo, all I wants is me Tailypo. And the old man said, get away, critter, there ain't nothing for you here. Go away now or I'll chop something else off. And he heard again, scritch, scritch, scritch. And soon enough, the voice said, Tailypo, Tailypo, all I wants is my Tailypo. Now the old man started to get a little afraid. And I don't know about you boys and girls, but when I'm afraid of something, I start to move the covers up underneath my chin. And if I'm really afraid, you know what I do? I take the covers and I put them up over my head. Well, that's exactly what the old man did. He took the covers and he put them up over his head because as he listened, the noises got louder and louder and louder. And suddenly he heard a big thump, as if something had come into the room. And as he was there in the bed, with the covers pulled all over his head, he heard scritch, 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 as if something was coming up on the bed. And his covers got pulled down a little bit. And they got pulled down some more. And soon they were right here. and he peered out over the covers. And do you know what he saw? He saw pointy ears covered in fur. He saw two red-orange eyes, and he saw a mouth full of big, sharp, white, pointy teeth. And he smelt the most horrible breath in the world, worse than dog breath. I don't know how to tell you this breath, but he smelt it, and he shivered in his bed. And that creature said, "Tailypo, Tailypo, give me back my Tailypo." Now, if you go into the woods today and you walk in deep enough, you can see that shack, but no one lives there. If you ask your neighbors what happened to that grouchy old man, they'll tell you all different stories. Some neighbors say he fought that critter, and once he won, he decided to move to another part of the woods. Other people say that he killed that critter and was so proud of what he did, he took it into the big city and took it around to the zoos to show it off. But I think I know what happened. One autumn night, I was walking home. I took a shortcut through the woods to get to my house. While I was there, I passed by that log cabin in the woods lit by the moonlight, and I heard scritch, 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 and I heard a voice say, "Tailypo, Tailypo, now I's got me Tailypo." The end. Now, boys and girls, I know that story might have been a little bit scary for some of you, and if you're scared, here's a couple things you can do. First thing, you can talk to your mommy and daddy, or you can do what I do when I get scared. I take my special friend Teddy to bed with me because I know when Teddy's with me, nothing is going to bother me. The end. Welcome to Storytime, and I look forward to seeing you again. Goodbye and thank you.